Welcome to our channel, Inside Vegas. David and I are excited to have you here. This is our third video. Can't believe that we're up to number 3. This is amazing. Again, we appreciate all of you taking the time to watch us. I want to give you a little information about me, my background. I've had close to 20 years of experience in entertainment and working on the Strip. Growing up as a kid here, I never thought I'd work on the Strip. I always thought I wouldn't. And here I am with a career like deeply rooted into the Strip. I was an usher at O. That's how I started my career, and that kind of set me up for entertainment. And I ran box offices for some of the major Cirque du Soleil shows, like Love at the Beatles' Love at Mirage, and Viva Elvis, that's no longer there, at Aria. I worked at O, and then I went off into the sales world and started doing other things like Madame Tussauds and Hard Rock Cafe, and really just expanding my knowledge and working in operations and sales. How about you, David? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, I kind of have an interesting background. I've been in ticketing and marketing for the last 10, 12 years now. I was working in the ticketing department at Cirque. I went over to work in marketing at AEG. I also worked with a small marketing firm here in Las Vegas, and I was the head of the box office at the Tropicana. It's been an interesting experience. I think what makes my, experience a little bit unique is that I also have a small tour company called Take a Hike Vegas, and that has been now running for 4 years, although it's kind of on a pause now during the pandemic. So that's me.
And I did want to mention too, that small company that you worked with Jordan there. So and I would love to have Jordan on a future video. So Jordan is somebody that is pretty near and dear to both David and I. Jordan was the vice president of resident shows for Las Vegas's Cirque du Soleil division, and he's the one that hired me to work for Cirque du Soleil. You and I have that big connection with him.
Yeah, really a great guy.
We really want to give information about, a lot of this is very industry stuff. And, please feel free to ask us questions when we say something that you're like, I don't know what that is. Like in the past, we've talked about parity and egress and things like that. And I know those are terms that you might not know. So let us know. We're going to do our best to add links and to describe that and to talk about that and to get a little bit more in depth about that. Because we want to make it industry, but we want it to make it very easy for other people that are out of the industry to understand and follow and have a good time with. Now we want to talk a little bit about COVID and the Las Vegas shows. And I came across this really cool article. In doing these shows, I'm trying to research the best I can. So I'm doing a lot of research, more research than I think I've ever done before, at least not since I was in college. So it's a lot of fun. And when I came across this, it was really interesting because it definitely struck a note to something that's very close to what I'm dealing with. The owner of the company that I recently worked for, Spiegelworld, his name's Ross Mollison, and he came across this really interesting cleaning agent that is a spray that could be put out. I'm going to read a little bit from this article, and we're going to link it below. It was from the Las Vegas Sun, which is another news publication. It's actually part of the Review Journal family. So my subscription is part of that. And it said, in a recent article from the Las Vegas Sun, they talk about a first of its kind air treatment called Grignard. I'm probably butchering the name of that. Grignard Pure, that kills more than 98% of coronavirus particles in the air. And on January 15th, the the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, approved an emergency exemption request for use of Grignard Pure as an additional tool for limited solutions to aid the fight against COVID-19 in Georgia and Tennessee. So where Ross picked it up was he's really championing this because he thinks it's a great opportunity to add more safety to the Las Vegas shows. So, I thought that was an interesting kind of springboard for us to talk about the precautions, the safety measures, things like that we know about, that we've heard about, that we think that Vegas is able to do to kind of deal with this pandemic moving forward.
Megan Messerly on Twitter is actually a really great resource. She updates She works for the NV Independent. So I would strongly suggest you guys follow her because her information is incredible. She does updates on vaccines, and she gives a really great overview of where we're at in terms of cases and tests, in terms of positivity as well. So she's a really great resource. I think this week, or maybe last week was the first week we have been trending across the 7-day average with less than 1,000 cases per day. So that's a big win. I think it was a month ago we were 18, 19, 2,000. So we're under 1,000 consistently now. So that's a really big deal. So I was reading that article that you were saying, and it looks like it's actually really interesting. I'm going to be interested to know how it can be worked out here in Vegas. That would be a really, really great additional tool for all of the shows to be able to implement, because that's kind of like the vaccine. It's actually a game changer to be able to eliminate that much of the coronavirus in the air.
I know in particular the show that I worked for, when they opened, they were so strict, and they put a procedure manual together that I understand a lot of other shows are now adopting, because they were so strict about it. All of the cast and all of the audience had to be masked without exception. They weren't allowing anything. So when you were performing, I think that there were certain performances that the performers would take their mask off while they were performing something. But there was a lot of performances that they were keeping their mask on even during the performance because it didn't have an effect on the performance. So, being a circus type of show, that worked well for Absinthe. They had, you had to take your temperature when you went in. They had hand sanitizers everywhere. They were doing the social distancing, and they also, and the other thing too, and I guess this kind of goes with the social distancing, but it's unique to shows, is that they call it the moat. So it's a 25-foot radius of a moat of a distance that needs to be from the stage to the audience. So that's one of the limitations that was really tough for the shows to overcome, because you're taking out a significant amount of seating to accommodate that 25-foot moat rule. But I understand that's to make it safe. You know what I mean? So you have these performers that are now a lot safer because now they're insulated 25 feet in a radius away from everybody, outside of the people that they're directly working with.
I don't know how much help the properties are going to be able, and then B, willing, I think, not only just financially, but in terms of liability. If one of those protocols breaks down, who ends up being liable for that, right? So there's definitely a lot of minutia that needs to be taken care of. These guys are still going to have to walk through the hotel and the casino. If you're very lucky, you might get a parking spot behind the actual stage, which is very rare, but you can maybe figure that out. But for the most part, a lot of the cast and crew of these productions, they're still eating in the employee dining rooms, right? So they're still with everyone else, and if they're in a bubble, well, then all of that's out the door right off the bat, right? So that doesn't work. So does that mean every production will have to stop them from going to the EDR? Does that mean that every production will have to have their performers in a bubble? How do you control that? It is interesting. It would be interesting to see someone produce that model here in Vegas, because it seems almost impossible. It's an interesting idea. And I do like when shows do that. I do like when they show you how careful they're being, because it shows you they're still being, they're not being willy-nilly about it. They're being very serious. But how does Vegas do that? That's kind of the question, right? All the time here. How does Vegas do that? How do you implement that in Vegas? Because you really can't. I know there's that moat you're talking about, but that's still not 100%, And if there's an artist doing something on stage that requires a lot of effort, and that they spit, and all this other, there's 100 different things that could still go wrong. Things that I've heard or seen, that the pod system would be an effective way, right? That seems to be how people are booking their tickets now. It's between 1 and 6 seats, or 1 and 8, or whatever the showroom can accommodate. You stick, and there's at least 6 to 10 feet, I think, between everyone. My understanding is you have to keep a mask on inside the showroom, whether it's a tent or an actual room. Um, on the surface, it seems safe, right? On the surface, it seems safe. But I know we've touched on this before. There's no standard. There doesn't seem to be a standard for anything, and I think that's part of the problem where each production is going to do what they can as best as they can because they need to run the show. But productions are not above cutting corners here or there. Productions are not above ensuring that at the end of the day, productions do exist to create a lot of beautiful art, and it creates really moving pieces on stage, but there's a bottom line to everything that they do. And if the bottom line isn't being met, then there's going to be an issue. So how do you regulate to ensure that performers, riggers, lighting, how do you ensure that they're all safe? Because they're all touching very different parts of the show, and they all have very different lives, and you can't ask them to bubble. It doesn't make any sense. How will they live, right? I think it's going to be an interesting question. I actually think that we'll start to just see kind of that pod system with that moat, and that's how entertainment will slowly come back, and then it'll just be open again. Because I think it's just too complex to. I take it back. It's not too complex. It can be done, and we've said it before, but like the people that run these shows, like the general managers of the show, anyone in operations, especially in Vegas, they know their stuff. They know what they're doing. If you told them you need to follow this, they'll do it and they'll ensure it, right? But they can't control things that are outside of that. So they can control everything within those four walls, but how do you control everyone outside? Like some of those precautions wouldn't matter to someone that's asymptomatic. Well, now it's just a super spreader event, right? So it's definitely proceed with caution. I mean, Copperfield opened, right, and then they closed. They had a case. I think that's happened somewhere else. And it does cost the productions money. You can't just cancel a show and not pay your artists, So there are things that have to be looked at from the back end of the production. But I know we touched on it before, like we have so many of these topics. But I think that showrooms, I think that the operations teams would absolutely be able to enforce these regulations. I just don't know that they're going to be effective because you can't enforce them 24/7. You can only enforce what you have control over. And how safe is it then? You know what I mean? So it's definitely an interesting question to see how Vegas will come back and what protocol will be in. I assume there'll be some kind of protocol to ensure safety moving forward that people can build into any kind of production that comes to Vegas. But I don't know. Like all the other things, I don't know, I think we're going to be too far along and too close. I think we're going to just start opening up with the moat and the pod and the basic things. But I don't know that we'll see anything that's particularly specific to Vegas, only because it's just so hard to manage. You can't even control people in their own rooms, right? You can't control them on the casino floor. You can't control anything that they're doing. So inviting them into an enclosed area does seem a little bit dangerous from the outside, just because you don't know what's actually happening, right?
I'm gonna look for the I believe that that guideline manual that I told you about that other shows I've heard are adopting. I believe that was put out by Ross, like on Facebook or something like that. I think I remember seeing them put it out. So if I could find that, I'll go ahead and link it so that everybody can see it below. But no, I think this was a great conversation. So yeah, I think I don't really know what else to say about it, but we just we want everything to open, and we're just trying to talk through what we think it could be and how it could happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I know you have a list of shows that are open or opening. Again, they're all on the smaller end because the costs can be controlled. And that's an interesting question too. How are costs being controlled? I don't want to have everything open up at the cost of artists having to give up 50% of their salary. Some of these dancers aren't making a lot of money. The scale in Vegas is crazy. You can have someone earning $50 to $100 a night, on a strip show. It doesn't seem to make sense, but it's possible, and it's going to happen. That's how dancers want to make their way in. You see that a lot with backup dancers. They're maybe only making $100 or $150 a night, which might seem like a lot, but that's a lot of energy that they're bringing in, a lot of what am I trying to say? That's a lot that they're putting their body through. And, it is going to wear down. They are going to get hurt. And chances are they don't have health benefits. Chances are they're independent contractors. So even for independent contractors or actual employees, I don't want all these productions to come back. And, we have a lot of artists that are going to have side hustles while they're actually performing. That's not what you want to see. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these companies come back. I'd like to think the bigger names will set the stage for a responsible return, but we never know. And of course, everyone's at a different scale. I mean, what Cirque pays versus extravaganza or something, those things are not remotely similar, I don't think. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because, yeah, I just don't want to see us coming back and then hearing stories again about how artists are struggling or how they're going to be hurt because they're focused on another job and they can't focus, So you want to make sure that everyone involved in the production is still getting paid what they deserve,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the list of shows that are open or about to be open, right? You see like Laugh Factory, Comedy Club, Piff the Magic Dragon. These are very small room shows. Even Carrot Top, I think was what 250, if that.
Yeah.
If that.
Big max, yeah.
I haven't been to the Copperfield Room in forever. Late Night Magic, Murray the Magician. I know he's not gonna get more than 150 people anyway. So, it's a lot of these smaller shows, and it makes sense because the bigger production shows. I mean, it's expensive to put a show on, and that's assuming you can control your costs. I mean, when you're talking about a room that is unionized, it definitely explodes the cost. And rightfully so. I mean, that's what they bargained. You came in knowing that. Yeah, it seems to be a lot of like you said, there's no big shows on this list. I guess David Copperfield might be the biggest name from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, David Copperfield's the biggest, and Thunder from Down Under. I don't know if that made it on the list, but they just announced that they're opening. Yeah, that's on there, Thunder from Down Under. So that's a bigger show, but that's kind of a niche show as well. I mean, that's not going to appeal to everybody necessarily. Where I think Copperfield definitely appeals to everybody.
Well, it has he has a mass appeal, right? Everyone knows who he is.
You have Tape Fate. I mean, you do have some things that none of them are big. I mean, yeah, Copperfield's going to be the biggest showroom, so it's gonna be interesting how they're going to not make it feel empty too. But I thought it was nice that I saw a variety of some shows, because for people that are choosing to come to Las Vegas, for us locals, if you're looking for something to do for Valentine's Day or whatever, you do have some options, and this might be that opportunity for you to see something that you maybe wouldn't have seen before. Carrot Top has been around forever, so maybe that's your opportunity to see him now. Fantasy, the extravaganza over at Bally's. There's a few different things that I think are really interesting on here that could be fun. You know what I mean? And now's the time to take advantage of that and to enjoy it, because we know that those big shows are trying to figure out every way they can to come back. And the minute they can, the minute they have 200, I mean, honestly, with Absinthe alone, just the show that I'm the closest to right now, the minute that restriction gets to 250, probably anything more than what it is currently at 50, even if it goes up just slightly, they're going to probably jump on that and open. And that's one of the bigger shows then. And Cirque, I don't know I have no idea what Cirque's threshold is, if they're saying like once the governor gives 1,000 seats, or I don't know what their threshold is, but whenever that's hit, they're primed and ready to open up. So it's just going to be really interesting to see that list go from what it is to then expanding very much and including some very high-end shows. So it's going to be interesting.
What do you make of, so Usher was announced, I think, in September for a residency. The Scorpions announced for a residency, I think, in July 4th. I believe these would be summer residencies. So Caesars has to be feeling pretty good.
I love Usher. He's one of like the people that I definitely have on my playlist. So for him to be having a residency, that was my personal. I was so excited, but it was right at the height of the pandemic, and I just remember looking at it with so much skepticism. Like, is this going to happen? How is this ever, like, what date are they going to actually put dates on sale? And are they going to ever honor those dates? Because, not that they don't have the best of intentions, but is it going to happen? Are we going to be past it to be able to do any of that stuff? And, to what we're talking about right now, if it stays at 50, because it's been it's been at 50 longer than we all thought it was going to be. If it's still at 50, that's not something that Usher's going to perform at. He needs it to be open up much bigger than that. Or, any of these big names. The other thing too was Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks is not doing a residency, but he's going to have a show at the Allegiant Stadium where Raiders are performing. And he's going to kick it off. That's going to be the first big non-sporting event they're going to have. And he was planning on having it in February. It got pushed back now to August. And who knows if that date's going to be firm or not.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Caesars now or Ticketmaster, and they're definitely on sale. I mean, all they're doing is just it's just a rolling thing, right? So you announce, or even if you're one of the smaller shows, you just stay on sale and you just have your box office refund and rebook, refund. I imagine that's all they've been doing really for a while now, as they have potential dates and then they can't. I agree with you though. I mean, Usher's going to have to be looking at a pretty close to 100%.
Right.
So they must be feeling pretty good about it. I get it that June could show up and we have another spike or something crazy, and they say, okay, we're going to roll it back. That would be devastating for the city, but it seems like, I mean, they're going to be ready to roll in the summer. I guess I'd be more, I'm curious to see if MGM or what will be happening with T-Mobile. So I know sometimes this might feel very doomy and gloomy, and it's been rough for a lot of people. It's been really, really hard. So I will never take that away. And we've all experienced some personal loss, whether it be someone that we know, someone that we love, a job. A lot of things have changed our lives pretty drastically. So I do want to point out that there are things to be hopeful about. I mean, the vaccine rollout has been great so far. It started rough, but it's getting so much better. They're fixing a lot of these problems. When it's still not fast enough, I understand a lot of people are still really upset about it. Trust me, I'm with you, but it's getting better, and that's definitely something really to be excited about, because it's been a pretty dark year for Vegas. Those first few months where we were all bicycling up and down the strip, watching those geese and those ducks just go up and down because they were the only visitors we had. That was rough. There are some things to be hopeful about. I think, again, like I said earlier, the vaccine's a really great thing. It seems like entertainment's planning to come back, hopefully by summer. That's a really big deal. The way that they sell tickets is already changed. I think those are really interesting and wonderful things. We can't fight this anymore, right? We have to keep going, accept it, and be creative about how we move forward.
And when you talk about the entertainment, that we were just talking about that. So I think Vegas is positioned so beautifully to be able to bounce back.
Sports coming to Vegas is a big deal. It's kind of definitely hyped the city up a little bit more. Gives it kind of more of a grown-up feeling now that we have professional sports. Obviously, we're not going to the Super Bowl. We didn't go to the Super Bowl, so temper your expectations. Some sports are better than others. But what I would love to see, and I don't have any data on this, but what I would love to see is the impact of specifically T-Mobile on all other entertainment in the city. You can't just remove 18,000 seats from what's at play. That's 18,000 people you're just not going to capture. And I know a lot of productions love the opportunity to go into T-Mobile to perform and to do the whole song and dance, but I don't know that translates into sales. Is it exposure? Sure. How much exposure? How great is it? I don't know. I can tell you that every time I'm there, I kind of see on the screen who's doing whatever just because I'm interested, but then I'm going to get mine and get my next thing. I would love to see if there's a negative effect on the entertainment industry because of this new element that's been introduced.
I agree with you that it definitely takes some seats out of inventory for us, or it definitely takes some people out of inventory for us to be able to sell tickets to. But When it comes to like the Golden Knights and even Raiders, and again, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would venture to say at least half of those numbers of those people going to it are locals. And those are locals that would not have gone, they wouldn't have gone to see one of our shows on a Tuesday night anyways. They're gonna make a date and make a very clear plan to go see the Golden Knights on that Tuesday night. If not, they would have been home relaxing, watching TV or whatever. So I don't think we lost out on that. We didn't miss anything there. Then you start talking about the clientele that comes in. So then, we kind of cut that in half a little bit. And then you start thinking about the people that come in. I think a majority of them it's like a destination. They came in specifically for that, but they have money. They are a little bit more high end, especially when we're talking about Golden Knights and like a hockey type of crowd and a football type of crowd. They have money to spend. So then you may not have them on the night of their game of whatever they're coming to watch, but I think you have that opportunity for that tourist that wouldn't have been in town otherwise. Because if you're talking about like, the Raiders clientele, the Raiders market is going to be a heavy California market, and that's a big market for us already. But I do think that there's some people that wouldn't have come here anyways. Like they wouldn't have maybe, like they know Vegas is here and they will come here occasionally, but now they're going to come here more often. Instead of coming maybe once a year, they're coming 2 or 3 times a year. So I think there's more of an opportunity there than on the positive than it is on the negative, because it's bringing, I think, a different type of clientele that wouldn't have come here otherwise. I think there's a unique way to market it, and I think that there is opportunity there.
I appreciate your enthusiasm and optimism.
I'll be honest, that's always how I've looked at that. Like if I was having that conversation with my boss, I would have said exactly what I just said to you. And then my boss would have said to me, great, now go get all those people that you think you can get. So then he would have thrown the challenge right back on me. So, but we just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. I know that tonight we talked about a few different topics, kind of heavier stuff. Maybe it wasn't, like we talked about in the past with Super Bowl and things like that. This was a little bit heavier. We talked about the vaccine and how it affects us. And we talked about, the different shows that are open and the different restrictions that some shows have opened with, and what we think that all the shows are going to have. So, it was a good topic. I enjoyed it. Thank you, David, for having this conversation with me. I really enjoy all the perspective that you have for it. And then, with that, I just wanted to let everybody know once again, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on all notifications. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.